Hello guys! So, now we are going to learn about qualitative research. We are from Group 5. Our members are Imanina Fitri Rahmawati, Gilang Kusuma Lestari, and Maria Swarinugreni. So, let's jump to the materials.
The first submaterial is the characteristic of a qualitative research. As a process, qualitative research has some characteristics that make it different with quantitative research. The first characteristic of qualitative research is that the methodologies contribute a great deal to the growing disciplines. Then, qualitative research is naturalistic inquiry, naturally, non-manipulative, unobtrusive, and non-controlling. Qualitative research is an inductive analysis with specific data, discover important categories and interrelationship. Qualitative research is also a holistic perspective because the whole phenomena under study is understood as a complex. Qualitative research is also an intense researcher's involvement, and it is ongoing data analysis because it captures people's personal perspective and experiences. Qualitative research is a personal contact and insight because personal experiences and insights are an important part of the inquiry and understanding of phenomenon. Qualitative research is also a dynamic system because it captures people's personal perspective and experiences. And the last characteristic is that qualitative research is unique case orientation, assume case is special and unique. Overall, the most difference between quantitative and qualitative research problem is that research problem best studied using the quantitative approach if the issue needs to be explained. But if the issue needs to be explored, the problem best addressed by the qualitative approach. In data collecting process, qualitative research needs some steps to collect the data. Based on the general characteristics of qualitative research, qualitative data collections consist of collecting data using forms with general, emerging questions to permit the participants to generate responses, gathering word or image data, and collecting information from a small number of individuals or sites. There are 5 interrelated steps in the process of qualitative data collections. These steps should not be seen as linear approaches, but often one step in the process does follow another. The first steps in collecting the data in qualitative research is identifying participants and sites to be studied. It is used to engage a sampling strategy that will best help the researchers to understand the central phenomenon and the research questions. Purposeful sampling based on places and people that can best help the researchers understand the central phenomenon is used in these steps. The second step is gaining access to these individuals and sites by obtaining permissions. The researchers need greater access to the site because they will typically go to the sites and interview people or observe them, because in qualitative research, the research problem needs to be explored. The third step in collecting the data in qualitative research is considering what types of information will best answer the research questions after permissions are in place. To find the information, this approach relies on general interviews or observations so that the researchers don't restrict the view of participants. The researchers do not use someone else's instrument as in quantitative research and gather close-ended information. Instead, they collect data with a few open-ended questions that have been designed. The next step is designing protocols or instruments for collecting and recording the information. In this step, rather than using pre-designed instruments from someone else or instruments that the researchers design, They will record information on self-designed protocols that help them organize information reported by participants to each question. The last steps in collecting the data is administering the data collections with special attention to potential ethical issues that may arise. The researchers will administer the procedures of qualitative data collections with sensitivity to the challenge and ethical issues of gathering information face-to-face and often in people's homes or workplace. Studying people in their own environment creates challenge for the qualitative researchers that may not be present in quantitative research when investigators mail out anonymous questionnaires or bring individuals into the experimental laboratory. In quantitative research, the focus is on random sampling, selecting representative individuals, and then generalizing from these individuals to a population. However, in a qualitative research, the intent is to develop an in-depth exploration of a central phenomenon, not to generalize to a population. Thus, to best understand the phenomenon, the qualitative researcher purposefully or intentionally selects individuals and sites that can best help them understand the central phenomenon. In purposeful sampling, researchers intentionally select individuals and sites to learn or understand the central phenomenon. The standard used in choosing participants and sites is whether they are information-rich or not. There are some sampling approach strategies in purposeful sampling. When the sampling occurs before the data collection, there are 6 sampling approach strategies that can be used. The first strategy is maximal variation sampling. This strategy is used when the intent of data sampling is to develop many perspectives. The researchers choose samples, cases, or individuals that has difference on some characteristics or traits. This procedure requires identifying the characteristic and then finding sites or individuals that display different dimensions of that characteristic. For example, researchers might first identify the characteristic of racial composition of high schools and then purposefully sample 3 high schools that differ on these characteristics, such as a primarily Hispanic high school, a predominantly white high school, and a racially diverse high school. The second strategy is extreme case sampling. This strategy is chosen when the intent is to describe particularly troublesome or enlightening cases, or a case that is noticeable for its success or failure. This strategy is a form of purposeful sampling in which the researchers study an outlier case or one that displays extreme characteristics. Researchers identify these cases by locating persons or organizations that others have cited for achievements or distinguishing characteristics. An autistic education program in elementary education that has received award might be an outstanding case to purposefully sample. The third strategy is typical sampling. When the researchers want to describe what is typical to those unfamiliar with the case, typical sampling is the best choice. It is a form of purposeful sampling in which the researchers studies a person or site that is typical to those unfamiliar with the situation. What constitutes typical, of course, is open to interpretation. However, persons might be asked at a research site or even a typical case can be selected by collecting demographic data or survey data about all cases. For example, a researcher could study a typical faculty member at a small liberal arts college because that individual has worked at the institution for 20 years and has embodied the cultural norms of the school. The fourth strategy is theory or concept sampling. Researchers choose theory and concept sampling when they want to generate a theory or explore a concept. The researchers might select individuals or sites because they help them understand a concept or a theory. It is a purposeful sampling strategy in which the researcher samples individuals or sites because they can help the researcher generate or discover a theory or specific concepts within the theory. To use this method, a clear understanding of the concept or larger theory expected to emerge is needed during the research. For example, in a study of 5 sites that have experienced distance education, the researchers have chosen these sites because study of them can help generate a theory of student attitudes toward distance learning. The fifth strategy is homogeneous sampling. Homogeneous sampling is chosen when the intent is to describe some subgroup in depth. Researchers might select certain sites or people because they possess a similar trait or characteristic. In homogeneous sampling, the researchers purposefully samples individual or sites based on membership in a subgroup that has defining characteristics. To use this procedure, the researchers need to identify the characteristics and find individuals or sites that possess it. For example, a case in a rural community, all parents who have children in school participate in a parent program. The researchers choose members of this parent program to study because they belong to a common subgroup in the community. The last strategy that can be chosen when the sampling occurs before the data collection is critical sampling. This strategy has intent to describe a case that illustrates dramatically the situation. The sampling strategy here is to study a critical sample because it is an exceptional case and the researcher can learn much about the phenomenon. For example, researchers study teenage violence in a high school where a student with a gun threatened a teacher. This situation represents a dramatic incident that portrays the extent to which some adolescents may engage in school violence. When sampling occurs when data collection has started, there are 3 strategies that can be chosen. The first strategy is opportunistic sampling. The first strategy has intent to take advantage of whatever case unfolds. After data collection begins, researchers might find that they need to collect new information to get the best answer to the research questions. This strategy will help researchers to answer the research questions. In this process, the sample emerges during the inquiry. Researchers need to be cautious about engaging in this form of sampling because it might divert attention away from the original aims of the research. However, it captures the developing or emerging nature of qualitative research nicely and can lead to novel ideas and surprising findings. The second strategy is snowball sampling. Snowball sampling is a form of purposeful sampling that has intent to locate people or sites to study. In certain research situations, researchers might not know the best people to study because of the unfamiliarity of the topic or the complexity of events. As in quantitative research, qualitative snowball sampling is a form of purposeful sampling that typically proceeds after a study begins and occurs when the researchers ask participants to recommend other individuals to be sampled. Researchers might pose this request as a question during an interview or through informal conversations with individuals at a research site. The last strategy is confirming or disconfirming sampling. This strategy is chosen if the researchers want to explore confirming or disconfirming cases used after data collection has started to confirm or disconfirm preliminary findings. Confirming and disconfirming sampling is a purposeful strategy used during a study to follow up on specific cases to test or explore further specific findings. Although the sampling serves to verify the accuracy of the finding throughout a study, it also represents a sampling procedure used during a study. Gaining access to the site or individuals in qualitative research involves obtaining permissions at different levels, such as the organization, the site, the individuals, and the campus institutional review boards. Of special importance is negotiating approval with campus review boards and locating individuals at the site who can facilitate the collection of qualitative data. Types of permissions to gain access is divided into two types. The first type is seek institutional reviews board approval. To gain access to participants and sites, researchers need permission to study individuals in a qualitative project, and it must go through the approval process of a campus institutional review board, include seeking permission from the board, developing a description of the project, designing an informed consent form, and having the project reviewed. Researchers need to provide a detailed description of the procedure to the institutional review board. This detail is needed because the board might not be familiar with the qualitative approach to educational research and because the researchers will spend time in people's home, workplace, or sites in which they gather data. The second type of permission to gain access is gatekeepers. In qualitative research, researchers often need to seek and obtain permissions from individuals and sites at many levels. Because of the in-depth nature of extensive and multiple interviews with participants, it might be helpful to identify and make use of a gatekeeper. A gatekeeper is an individual who has an official or unofficial role at the site, provide entrance to a site, helps researchers to locate people, and assist in the identification of place to study. A gatekeeper may be a teacher, a principal, a group leader, or the informal leader of a special program, and usually has insider status at the site the researchers plan to study. There are four types of qualitative data. The first type is observations. Observations represent a frequently used form of a data collection, with the researcher able to assume different roles in the process. It is the process of gathering open-ended, first-hand information by observing people and places at a research site. The advantage of observation is that the opportunity to record information, study actual behavior, and study individuals who have difficulty verbalizing their ideas. The disadvantage of observation is researchers will be limited to those sites and situations where they can gain access, and in the sites, researchers might have difficulty developing rapport with individuals. Observation continues to be a well-accepted form of qualitative data collection. Using it requires that researchers adopt a particular role as an observer. No one role is suited for all situations. There are three popular roles that can be used. 1. Role of a participant observer, when the researchers take part in activities in the setting they observe. 2. Role of a non-participant observer, when the researchers visits a site and records notes without becoming involved in the activity. And 3. Changing observational roles, when the researchers adapt their role to the situation. The second type is interviews and questionnaires. The qualitative research occurs when researchers ask one or more participants general, open-ended questions and record their answers. The researchers then transcribe and types the data into a computer files for analysis. The advantage of interviews and questionnaires is provide useful information when the researchers cannot directly observe participants, and they permit participants to describe detailed personal information. The interviewer also has better control over the types of information received. The disadvantage of interviews is interviews provide only information filtered through the views of the interviewers. Interview data may be deceptive and provide the perspective the interview wants the researcher to hear. The presence of the researchers also may affect how interview responds. Interview response also may not be articulate, perspective, or clear. Equipment issues may be a problem, and researchers need to organize recording and transcribing equipment if used in advance of the interview. And during the interview, researchers need to give some attention to the conversation with the participant. The third type is documents. Documents represent a good source for text data for a qualitative study. The advantage of documents are being in the language and words of the participants, who have usually given thoughtful attention to them, ready for analysis without the necessary transcription, consists of public and private records that researchers obtain about the sites or participants in a study that provide valuable information in helping researchers understand central phenomena in qualitative studies. The disadvantage of documents are sometimes difficult to locate and obtain. Information may not be available to the public and located in distant archives, requiring the researchers to travel, which take time and can be expensive. And the documents may be incomplete, inauthentic, or inaccurate. The last types of qualitative data is audiovisual materials. Audiovisual materials consist of images or sounds that researchers collect to help them understand the central phenomenon under study. In this approach, participants are shown pictures and asked to discuss the contents. These pictures might be personal photographs or albums of historical photographs. The advantage of audiovisual material is people easily relate to image. Image provide an opportunity for the participant to share directly their perceptions of reality. It also provides extensive data about the real life as people visualize it. The disadvantage of audiovisual material is images are difficult to analyze because of the rich information. The researchers may influence the data collected in selecting the photo album to examine or requesting that a certain types of drawing be sketched. Researchers may impose the meaning of the phenomenon on participants rather than obtain the participants' view. When videotaping, the researchers face the issues of what to tape, where to place the camera, and the need to be sensitive with camera-shy individuals.
Okay, for the next slide, we go to the procedures used to record data. An essential process in qualitative research is recording data. This process involves recording information through research protocols, administering data collection so that you can anticipate potential problems in data collection, and bringing sensitivity to ethical issues that may affect the quality of the data. For the first, using protocols. As already discussed, for documents and visual materials, the process of recording information may be informal, taking notes, or formal, optically scanning the material to develop a complete computer text file. For observation and interviews, qualitative inquiries use specially designed protocols. Data recording protocols are formed, designed, and used by qualitative research to record information during observation and interviews. For the first, an interview protocol. An interview protocol is a form designed by the researcher that contains instructions from the process of the interview, the question to be asked, and space to take notes of response from the interviewee. And then, an observational protocol. An observational protocol is a form designed by the researcher before data collection that is used for taking field notes during an observation. As with interview protocols, the design and development of observational protocols will ensure that you have an organized means for recording and keeping observational field notes. And then, this is the sample interview protocol. It contains a header to record essential information about the interview, statement about the purpose of study, a reminder that participants need to sign the consent form, and a suggestion to make preliminary tests of the recording equipment. Other information you might include in the header would be organization or work affiliation of the interviewees, their educational background and position, the number of years they have been in the position, and the date, time, and location of the interview. Following this header are 5 brief, open-ended questions that allow participants maximum flexibility to respond to the question. The first question serves the purpose of an icebreaker, sometimes called the grand tour question, to relax the interviewees and motivate them to talk. This question should be easy to understand and cause the participant to reflect on experience that they can easily discuss, such as please describe your role in the incident. The final question on this particular instrument help the researcher locate additional people to study. The core questions, question 2 until question 4, address major research questions in the study. For those new to qualitative research, you might ask more than 4 questions to help elicit more discussion from interviewees and move through awkward moments when no one is talking. However, the more questions you ask, the more you are examining what you seek to learn rather than learning from the participant. There is often a fine line between your question being too detailed or too general. A pilot test of them on a few participants can usually help you decide which ones to use. In addition to the 5 questions, you might use prompts to encourage participants to clarify what they are saying and to urge them to elaborate on their ideas. You provide space between the questions so that the researcher can take short notes about comments made by interviewees. Your notes should be brief, and you can develop an abbreviated form for stating them. The style for recording these notes varies from researcher to researcher. It is helpful for you to memorize the wording and the order of the question to minimize losing eye contact. Provide appropriate verbal transition from one question to the next. Recognize that individuals do not always respond directly to the question you ask. When you ask question 2, for example, they may jump ahead and respond to question 4. Closing comment remind you to thank the participant, assure them of the confidentiality of the response. This section may also include a note to ask the interviewees if they have any question, and a reminder to discuss the use of the data and the dissemination of information from the study. Okay, for the next, field and ethical issues need to be anticipated. When collecting data, researchers who engage in qualitative studies typically face issues that they need to resolve. Also, because qualitative research involves going to the research site of the participants, staying a considerable time, and asking detailed questions, ethical issues are likely to arise that need to be anticipated. For the first, field issues. Access. Anticipate the amount of time it will take to recruit participants to your study and the difficulty of recruitment. Some useful strategies include providing small financial incentive for individuals to participate. Also remind participants a day or two before data collection of the exact time. and they you will observe or interview them. Stage the data collection so that they will feel comfortable responding, and schedule it at a time that is most convenient to them. Be realistic about the amount of time the data collection will take and convey this time to the participants. For the next observing, you need to know your observational role, participant, non-participant, and clearly convey this role to your participants. Try not to take in everything the first time you observe. Form general impression first and then narrow your scope of observation. Take time to record your notes immediately after you observe so that you do not forget important details. For the next interviews, prepare your equipment adequately. Check the functioning of your equipment prior to your interview. During the actual interview, use icebreaker to open the conversation. Keep your opinion to yourself and be prepared to keep the interviewee on track. Interviewees may not answer each question in order, but make sure that they answer each of your questions. Schedule your time so that you cover all of the questions on your interview protocol. Recognize that transcribing audio tape recordings take substantial time and schedule for it in your research plan. For the next documents, anticipate the amount of time that may be required to locate, obtain permission for, and secure both public and private documents for your research. Always maintain a critical eye toward the documents you obtain. As much as possible, check them out to make sure they are credible and accurate. If you ask participants to keep a journal, provide clear instruction about the topics to be included in the journals. Recognize that younger children need more specific instruction than older children do. Ask participants to write as legibly as possible in their journals. And for the last, audiovisual material. When you videotape, plan ahead to keep the room as quiet as possible. Place the camera where it will be least obtrusive and openly discuss with the participants whether they are comfortable being videotaped. If we plan to collect photographs from participants, give clear instruction about what they need to photograph or the nature of the photograph you will be collecting from them. Similar to documents, if you collect artifacts, drawings, or relics, check their authenticity as a useful record for your qualitative research. This is figure 7.8, Field Issues in Qualitative Research. You can see in this slide the access, observation, interviews, document, and journals, and the last audiovisual materials that I have been explained before. Okay, for the next is ethical issues. In gathering data for a qualitative project, a researcher seeks an in-depth description of a phenomenon. Participants may be asked to discuss private details of their life experience over a period of time. This process requires a sufficient level of trust based on a high level of participant disclosure. This discussion advances some ethical issues to be anticipated when conducting qualitative research and also offers guidelines for conducting qualitative research. It begins with the identification of some guidelines for ethical practices and then reviews key issues likely to arise, such as informing participants of the purpose of the study, refraining from deceptive practices, sharing information with participants including your role as a researcher, being respectful of the research site, reciprocity, using ethical interview practice, maintaining confidentially, and collaborating with participants. Research methodologies and professional associations offer comprehensive but not exhaustive lists of ethical principles that may guide researchers in conducting ethical studies. We go to the next slide. 6 steps in analyzing and interpreting qualitative data. This is the qualitative process of data analysis. It is inductive in form, going from the particular or the detailed data to the general codes and terms. Keeping this in mind help you understand how qualitative researchers produce broad terms or categories from diverse detailed databases. Although the initial analysis consists of subdividing the data, later we will discuss coding the data, the final goal is to generate a larger consolidated picture. It involves a simultaneous process of analyzing while you are also collecting data. In qualitative research, the data collection and analysis, and perhaps the report writing, are simultaneous activities. When you are collecting data, you may also be analyzing other information previously collecting, looking for major ideas. This procedure differs from traditional approaches in quantitative research, in which data collection occurs first, followed by data analysis. The phases are also iterative, meaning you cycle back and forth between data collection and analysis. In qualitative research, you might collect stories from individuals and return for more information to fill in gaps in their stories as your analysis of their stories proceeds. Qualitative researchers analyze their data by reading it several times and conducting an analysis each time. Each time you read your database, you develop a deeper understanding about the information supplied by your participants. There is no single accepted approach to analyzing qualitative data, although several guidelines exist for this process. It is an eclectic process. Qualitative research is interpretive research, in which you make a personal assessment as to a description that fits the situation of or terms that capture the major categories of information. The interpretation that you make of a transcript, for example, differs from the interpretation that someone else makes. This doesn't mean that your interpretation is better or more accurate. It simply means that you bring your own perspective to your interpretation. Prepare and organize the data for analysis. For the first, organize data. At an early stage in qualitative analysis, you organize data into file folders or computer files. You can read by yourself the entire explanation and then transcribe data. During qualitative data collection, you will collect text or word through interviewing participants or by writing field notes during observations. And here are a few more guidelines to facilitate transcription. You can read it by yourself. And for the next, analyzing by hand or computer. This figure hints for transcribing audio tape interviews. You can read it by yourself. A hand analysis may be preferred when you are analyzing a small database, are not comfortable using computers, or have not learned a qualitative computer software program. Want to be close to the data and have a hands-on feel for it without the intrusion of a machine. Have time to commit to a hand analysis, since it is a labor-intensive activity to manually sort, organize, and locate words in a text database. You might base your decision on several factors. Use a computer program when you are analyzing a large database. are adequately trained in using the program and are comfortable using computers, have researched to purchase a program or can locate one to use, need a close inspection of every word and sentence to capture specific words or meaning of passage, and then use of qualitative computer programs. For the first procedures for using software programs, and then basic features of software programs. There are features to consider when comparing qualitative data analysis software. You can read it by yourself. For the next, specific programs available. For the first, Atlas T. This Windows PC program enables you to organize your text, graphic, audio, and visual data files along with your coding memos and findings into a project. For the second, Hyper Research. This program is available for both Windows PC and Mac. It is an easy-to-use qualitative software package that enables you to code and retrieve, build theories, and conduct analysis of your data. For the third, MaxQDA. This Windows PC program is a powerful tool for text analysis that you can use for grounded theory-oriented code and retrieve analysis as well as for more sophisticated text analysis. And the last, NVivo. This software program is also for Windows PC, designed for researchers making sense of complex data, and Vivo offers a complete toolkit for rapid coding through exploration and rigorous management and analysis. It also provides for visually mapping categories identified in your analysis.
Well, after we organized and transcribed our data and decided whether to hand or computer analyze it, it is time to begin data analysis. This consists of exploring the data and developing codes as first steps in analysis. So let's jump to the first step, that is explore the general sense of the data. Here, we exploring the data to obtain a general sense of the data, memoing ideas, thinking about the organization of the data, and considering whether we need more data. Writing memos in the margins of field notes or transcripts or under photographs helps in this initial process of exploring the data. These memos are short phrases, ideas, concepts, or hunches that occur. The second step, that is code the data. Coding is the process of segmenting and labeling text to form description and broad themes in the data. So, the coding process. In this coding process, you need to initially read through the text data overall, and then you will find many pages of text. And then divide the text into segments of information, and you will get many segments of text. After you divide them into segments, you must label the segments of information with codes. In here you may get 30 until 40 codes. And then reduce overlap and redundancy of codes. Here you will get codes reduced to 20. And then you must collapse codes into themes, and you will get codes reduced to 5 until 7 themes. So it must be still confusing for you. So let's jump to the illustration. In this illustration, you can see that there is a text which the process of reconstructing curriculum in rural high school settings. And in the left hand side, you will see the quotes, all of quotes that you will get from this passage. And then in the right hand side, you will see the themes and other ideas. So let's see carefully here. In the first passage, you can find one quote that is close knit community. And then the second passage, you see the important things that is health of the community or community values. Then the difference with themes, the themes you will get the potential theme, that is the community. And then you can put your idea here, getting a good sense here for the community and its values. And you find the quotes, the important quotes, and then you find the other themes, the leaders from these quotes. There is change in is threatening and visionary skills of talented people. So from these quotes, you will get the potential theme. In here, for example, we have two potential themes. So what's the function of code that we have already got? Using code to build description themes. So first, we must know what is description. Description is a detailed rendering of people, places, or events in a setting in qualitative research. In here, you must developing detail, which is important, and the researcher analyze data from all research, such as interviews, observation, and documents, in order to build a portrait of individuals or events. So this is the illustration of description. In the first passage, this is narrative passage, the first paragraph, you get the idea that is description builds from broad to narrow and situate the reader in the place or context in order to make such the description. So you need to make some notes here, detail to create a sense of being there, use action verbs and vivid modifiers and adjectives, and etc. And then the next is themes. Like quotes, themes have labels that typically consist of no more than 2 or 4 words. For example, like denial, campus planning, and etc. Through initial data analysis, you may find 30 to 50 quotes, and its subsequent analysis, you reduce these quotes to 5 to 7 major themes through the process of eliminating redundancy, like the previous model in coding model. And then when you have the theme, you can uh, break down them into major theme and minor themes. For example, we have major themes, safety, so we have the sub themes or the minor themes, safety of students in the classroom or types of services. You must know about the contrary evidence. The contrary evidence, it means the evidence in a description is not support or doesn't support your themes. So we can call it the contrary evidence. And then the saturation. The saturation is the point where you have identified the major themes and no new information can add to your list or them or themes or to the details for existing themes. So in here you must to check with participant confirm that they had adequately specified this theme. So these 2 point contrary evidence and saturation is the uh, luck situation when you get the themes or when you get the themes of your description. And then for the next, we have layering and interrelating themes. What is layering themes? Layering themes build on the idea of major and minor themes but organizes the themes into layers from basic elementary themes to more sophisticated ones. So you can see the example here. The basic elementary themes is the layer 1. We have the database, interview transcription, observational field notes, newspaper reports, and videotapes. And in the second layer, we have descriptive analysis of the chronology of events following the incident. And in the third layer, we have denial, fear, safety triggering, campus planning by identify, identifying the themes from the data. And the fourth layer is two broad social, psychological, and psychological perspective. So you can conclude something here. In the layering themes, we organize them from detail to the general one. And then the interrelating themes. In here, the researchers connects the themes to display a chronology or sequence of events, such as when qualitative researchers generate a theoretical and conceptual model. So in here, the most important is about chronology and sequence of events. Then representing and reporting the findings. First, representing findings. In here, qualitative researchers often display their findings visually. So, the representing findings is mostly about presenting your findings visually, and the reporting findings mostly about in narrative or in paragraph. So let's start in the representing findings. There are many ways to represent your findings. The first is create a comparison table and then develop a hierarchical tree diagram, present figures, draw a map, and develop a demographic table. As I said before, the reporting finding is mostly about narrative discussion. There is a written passage in a qualitative study in which authors summarize in detail the findings from their data analysis. You must know about this is some hints you should know. First, include dialogue that provides support for themes. and then state the dialogue in the participant's native language or in the regional or ethnic dialect, and then use metaphors and analogies. In reporting on the competition and concerns surfacing during the implementation of distance education in the states of Maine, April wrote metaphorically about how students and netizens support is a political football game. That is an example. And then report quotes from interview data or from observation of individuals. These quotes can capture feelings, emotions, and ways people talk about their experience, and then report multiple perspectives and contrary evidence. Identify this perspective based on different individuals, sources of information, or multiple views held by one person, and then write in vivid detail. Find good description of an individual event or activity. And the last, specify tensions and contradiction in individual experience. For example, Haber and Whelan report the personal stories of a female teacher who experienced a lack of support about a special education student in the classroom. They discuss the tension this teacher feels between being in control in her classroom and the out of class pressure that she experienced from her school coordinator. And then we go to the data interpreting. How can we interpreting our findings? Interpretation in qualitative research means that the researcher steps back and forms some larger meaning about the phenomenon based on personal views, comparisons with past studies, or both. Qualitative research is interpretive research, and you will need to make sense of the findings. And we go to the first. In the first interpreting, first you must summarize your findings. This is to provide us with an overview of the findings to complement the more detailed result in the description and theme passage. Then, convey personal reflection. Because qualitative researchers believe that your personal views can never be kept separate from interpretation. Personal reflection about the meaning of the data are included in the research study. You base this personal interpretation on hunches, insights, and intuitions. So, this is from your personal reflection towards your findings. And then you must make comparison to the literature or past studies. This interpretation may compare qualitative findings with reported views of a social science concept found in the literature, or it may combine personal views with an educational or social science term or idea. The fourth thing is over limitation and suggestion for future research. The qualitative researcher suggests possible limitation or weakness of your study and makes recommendation for future research. This limitation may address problems in data collection, unanswered questions by participants, or better selection of purposeful sampling of individuals or sites for the study. Implication for Future research may include the use of the findings for practice or the need for future research. Next to the validating the accuracy of the findings. After you analyze your data by your mind, by your opinion, then you must validate the accuracy of your finding. First, it's called triangulation. Triangulation is the process of corroborating evidence from different individuals, types of data, or methods of data collection in description and themes in Qualitative research. In here, the different individuals, for example, like principal and student. So you must to check both opinion from the principal or and the students, for example. And then types of the data. You must validate about the observational field notes and the interviews. And then the methods of data collection means documents and interviews from your findings. And then the second is member checking. This is a process in which the researcher asks one or more participants in the study to check the accuracy of the account. This check involves taking the findings back to participants and asking them, in writing or in an interview, about the accuracy of the report. You may ask about how many aspects of the study, such as whether of the description is complete and realistic, if the themes are accurate to include, and if the interpretations are fair and representative. And then the third thing is external audit. The researchers may also ask a person outside the projects to conduct a thorough review of the study and report back in writing the strength and the weakness of the project, in which a researcher hires or obtains the service of an individual outside the study to review different aspects of the research. The auditor reviews the projects and writes or communicates an evaluation of the study. They typically ask questions such as, are the findings grounded in the data? Are inferences logical? Are the themes appropriate? And etc. So that's all from our group's presentation. Thank you and see you.